So yeah, dude, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Just so
Thanks.
yeah, because I we talk a bit always before every single one, and then I hit record. So it's just like yeah, I have to find some interesting way of segueing in for everybody. But you, I mean, yeah, whatever.
No worries.
Just ask the first question on the sheet, man. How you dealing with isolation, man? How's it going?
That's a good question. That's a good question. I think I've been personally in isolation. I've been in isolation since beginning of March because I also my son was just born the 5th of March,
Mhm.
and he was born a week before it started to hit the Netherlands.
Okay.
Before we start to go into what they call today um, intelligent lockdown, which is like loosely, it's like a lockdown with loose rules and measurements that people need to follow um, according to their own personal judgment. So I kind of like in the beginning, it took me time to accept it, especially considering that it happened so abruptly. You can, if that's a good word to use, because it felt like from one day to the next, things just changed drastically,
Mm.
especially for artists, people that travel, people that that find themselves being out a lot, coming and socializing with people. So that took a few weeks. That took a couple of weeks to get used to, and now after that, I have to say that I'm really liking it, to be honest, because
Yeah.
uh, it's like I got a lot of time to observe and to think about how I lived my life before that,
Mhm.
and what were the things that were important for me, and what I thought was important for me, what I thought is important for other people that they need from me. And it's like a whole newfound perspective about how I perceive my time, how I want to spend my time. Um, yeah, it's I have to say it's a very transformative time, and I'm seeing it with a lot of other people also, and that's really interesting, really interesting. So I'm loving it, to be honest. I'm really loving the isolation.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I think I'm the same way. Man, yeah. Like, yeah, today, yeah, it's just a great day. Today was actually the last day of my 30-day challenge. I'll just tell you a bit about my
Oh, cool, cool, yeah.
just working out every morning before breakfast. And through that, a bunch of, I don't know, maybe you can speak to this too, but I find there's a bunch of other weird side effects that have come out of just putting myself in a position of like, okay, I'm going to start something. And actually, yeah, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. I'm curious what your thoughts are about like starting something new and like, and then following through with it and what, like, maybe talk about some of the things you're starting that are new through this whole process.
Okay. So actually, it's funny because about 6.5 years ago, I built a garden on the property where I'm living, and I had more time back then. I built it with someone. It had like a function, the space that I had back then was basically tiles and a lot of open space that was not used. So I built with a friend what you call permaculture garden
Okay.
to grow food. But then when my career started to take off,
Hmm.
I kind of neglected it completely, and it became this thing. The house was always in neat shape, but all the outside was so neglected. And then, of course, the crisis came, coronavirus crisis, and I just said, you know what, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to build all of it by myself together with my wife.
Hmm.
Um, and this is going great, man. This is like building this entire garden, planting food, reshaping certain parts, certain corners of the garden. Really thinking of bringing chickens there, bringing livestock. Really thinking um, um, in that trajectory of like, okay, what do we need? What is it that we need? And I mean, we didn't finish it yet, but the small parts that we finished in the garden are so satisfying. It feels so great to come every morning and see how slowly it's developing and growing. Um, yeah, I learned, it's the metaphors that are coming from cultivating earth,
Mhm.
creating compost, cultivating seeds are so intertwined with what we're experiencing right now, and actually what we're experiencing in general. This whole thing of patience, the whole thing of watering certain aspects of yourself, weeding out other aspects of your mind, your consciousness.
Mhm.
I mean, the majority of what I'm doing right now with my garden is cleaning up and bringing it back to life, bringing it back to it being healthy and functioning, you know.
Mhm.
Um, so that's a big thing that I started. And of course, if I look at the music, it started to, it got like a whole new light in the sense of there are no deadlines, there are no like financial restrictions and constrictions of like, okay, this needs to happen. We have to put this on stage. We go from one day to the next, to the next tour, to this. It's more like, okay, what is it? What is it that I want to play? What is it that I want to practice? Um,
Mhm.
and that is completely refreshing, and not having that stress constantly.
Mhm.
Um, that is great. So I don't know if it's completely connected to what you asked, but for
Yeah.
sure, this thing of starting something new, starting a new skill without the pressure of needing it to be for the outside world. That's something that is very refreshing to have.
Yeah, no, I think that's, you touch on a good point with that. I think, let me just ask, like, what are you practicing specifically? Like, what pieces or what kind of things? I'm just curious.
I'll ask you for a moment. Could you ask me that again?
Yeah, what are you practicing specifically? Like, which pieces or what kind of
Oh
stuff?
yeah. So I'm practicing actually. It's a piece that I always wanted to play as an encore.
Hmm.
To have like the gig is over and then just come and play it. It's the Pathetic Sonata from Beethoven.
Okay.
The whole like three parts. Yeah. So I kind of got them. I got fir- the first part and the second part pretty good. The third part I'm practicing right now. Um, it's also what I'm experiencing is that because there is space and there is no deadline, the practicing becomes much more enjoyable.
Sure.
And I have to say, I love classical music. I'm practicing a lot of classical music. Um,
Mm.
it's a lot of Mozart, a lot of Bach. Also, funny enough, it's just it's also something to keep the muscles going constantly and to stay in shape. Um, I think that sonata also with Beethoven, the Pathetic Sonata is something. It's an incredible piece, I have to say, and it inspires me really to look at my compositions uh, in a different light,
Mm.
and just to have the time to study. That is a great gift,
Yeah.
you know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, man. I hear you. I, it's actually funny. I feel like, how would I say this? I feel like, I guess I would even ask this too. I mean, you talk about just not feeling that outside pressure to kind of get that stuff going. Um, yeah, I want to know, like, this outside pressure. Maybe, maybe it's good. Maybe this would be a good topic to talk about for a second. I'm curious, like, what does that look like for you when that outside pressure is there? Like, what is that
Well,
like?
a great example. A great example is actually today. Today, I was supposed to have my premiere in the Paradiso, in the big hall there as artistic director of a collective that we built here in Amsterdam with musicians from Morocco, Lebanon, Iraq, Belgium, the Netherlands. Like we would be 18 musicians on stage. Uh, I wrote the arrangements together with the great oboist Maripepa Games Contreras.
Hmm.
Um, really, she did fantastic work on writing it like orchestrally, and it was like this huge pressure, of having 2 days of rehearsals, which would be yesterday and the day before. 6 hours dealing with different languages, different backgrounds, different cultures of musicians, bring them all together, making sure that the the hall is completely full. The music is top notch. Um, Having it filmed, recorded, having people from the industry coming, having uh, you know uh, music lovers, followers of the collective, everything all together. We're talking about 600 people in the hall together with us. So that was it had its pressure, um, and it also had like this level of terror, that I was like, am I going to be able to do that? Um, and also, don't forget that I just got a baby boy. So all of that mixed up together, my son is going to turn 6 weeks next week, on Wednesday. So that all together was pretty scary, I have to say.
Hmm.
But of course, things change now. Completely changed.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at it completely differently. Like, was the pressure justified? What was I afraid of, actually? What was the pressure? What was the thing that I was fearing? Because it's unknown. Probably it will be a great show. I mean, we're all professionals. We know what we're doing. But
Sure.
what was the thing that I was scared of? What was the thing that that seemed to me like daunting? So that's pretty much that. This constant thing of having more and being more successful and having advantages and making more money, and it just seems it seems ridiculous now. Sorry, it seems like like it was completely out of proportions.
No, I'm glad you mentioned it though. I have that feeling too. I've had that feeling for a long time. I mean, I'll speak to my own experience. A lot of times here, specifically in Germany, not being German and how that all works, sometimes I feel like, I have to really like work really hard to, or I have to like kind of, I wouldn't even say, how do I even put it? Like, yeah, that pressure, to earn money and to like make something of myself while I'm here kind of comes into play, at least in my own thing. And, it's really easy to get into the world of compare and despair, I think, as well. When you look at, social media feeds, or you're just out and about playing gigs and you talking to colleagues, or when you're even just, trying to write your own thing and you're thinking about, man, I got to think about like that cat, or you're thinking about like, oh, my teacher here told me this, and all of a sudden, you hear their voice in your head of like, come on, you got it, so
Yeah, yeah,
whatever that looks like for you, I guess, or for anybody. But I mean, I have that my own experience with it, and all of a sudden to just have all that kind of get put on pause, or I feel like this time has just put all of that on pause, so to speak. Like,
totally.
there on some level, but I guess what I see that's happened is there's this kind of, it's the time to create, and it's a time to do it without that restriction. And I think, what you're talking about with this is like major. But I guess moving forward, you talked a bit about the pieces you're working on right now. You talked about having a son. You talked about starting, basically taking time to work with your garden. I,
Yeah,
I'm curious about now is also within it, something that came up in one of the interviews, or at least for me, I realized, there's some, just given this month of like chaos of like of a huge shift, if there's been any mishaps or like lapses in judgment on your part, how do you
yeah,
like how are you dealing with that? Like, I mean, I know for me, I had a student and I, had him on Zoom, and I had a conversation with money, and it was like weird because he's a young student. It's not, I didn't even think for a second, oh wait, I should ask your parents to come in the room, that kind of thing. And I guess maybe speak on maybe some of those feelings of like, oh man, those things.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes up to my mind is, my relationship, for instance. Some bickering and fighting, or like arguments that are, that they are created due to the lack of space and the lack of mobility that we have these times. Like there's no possibility. Let's say there is a possibility to go out, of course, and take some space, but it's very constrained. I
Right.
mean, there is no there is not so much of the outside world to interact with, to bring back home,
Hmm.
and to, to work it out and to tell your spouse, your life partner about, and to share your information. It's all of a sudden like, wow, we're just here constantly, and that requires a new level of sensitivity.
Hmm.
So I had lapse of judgment. I was just thinking like, oh my god, I can't take it, and I would like lash out, which later on, thanks to the nature of my relationship, we could immediately talk about it, and of course, grow from it. Um, of course, the whole thing of teaching online is just a whole new experience. It's very, I have to say, it takes twice the amount of energy, to be honest, and because I find it, things that I would just explain easily, and just like moving the hand, like, just put it here. This is you're playing a C here, you're playing a B here. It's the first finger, second finger. Now it's like I need to repeat it again and again. And I did lose my patience a couple of times. I was like, okay, what do I need to do? How can I do this? Okay, if I just share my screen, and I'm gonna, just point it out, and I need to accept that progress is going to be slower, and the probably mistakes that are done by the student are things that I will have to correct over a few lessons, not just one lesson, and we're, to the next thing. Um,
Totally.
yeah, so more lapse of judgment. I think this whole thing, yeah, this whole thing of like obsessively checking Corona news. That really Uh, do you hear me? Yeah. So this whole thing of obsessively checking Corona news, and that is something really changed in the last couple of weeks. I have to say, it's like, you know the numbers that I'm seeing, and what is happening, and what is this. It's like, what else can we do instead of just, except just taking care of our community, and taking care of our own home and ourselves. That's what it's trying to teach us. It feels to me.
Yeah, totally. I mean, yeah, yeah, the news at this point, I mean, it's pretty, it's laughable. I mean, because there's no way to check like these numbers. These are just the numbers that people were testing, on a certain level.
Exactly.
And yeah, I mean, there's a ton of people who are self-quarantining or have it, don't even know they have it. They're just feeling a sore throat. I would be, we just don't, we're also in a very privileged position being in a wealthier part of the world. I'll say that too, where we can have access to these things. But
No, the thing is also is that it feels like it's so I mean, you can't actually, when you look at the news, it's so polarizing constantly. It's like this news source says this news source says that. They're just busy, of course, promoting certain agendas,
right,
but it also changes from one week to the next. Fauci said they're going to be between 100,000, 240,000 deaths in America, and then all of a sudden 60,000. It's like, okay, you know what? I'm going to take a break today from listening to all of that, because it doesn't matter. You know, there is something that is happening out there. I'm at home with my family. I'm taking care of us. That's it. You know, we're going back to basics, basically.
and that's beautiful. I think I'm glad that you're always someone I kind of see as someone who really, in my life since we've met, who's really just had a desire to get to that place of being simplifying life, if anything. And that's
Yeah, sure.
the music, and it comes out in your music too, I should say, which is, yeah, I love it. But
Okay.
the teaching thing, going back to that, I mean, I don't know. I found it the exact same way too. It takes twice as long, and these little technical things that I can just grab a student and be like, maybe not grab, but sit up straight. Like
Yeah,
this. Now
exactly.
you can't really police them because they're in another room and somewhere in
No,
the world, and you're just like, all right, well, that's cool.
Yeah, and it's like listening through the computer, and you're like, and then they're lost for a moment, and then it's this, and it's like, I don't like. Is it a good sound? You know, because when you're there, when you're interacting with the student, just like there is this energy, this exchange of energy that is like so quick. It happens so quick, and it happens so fluently. But now it's like, I lost you. Could you do it again? You fall. I didn't hear it. You know, these technical things that we have to overcome. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, I want to just let me pull up my pad because it went blank. But speaking of lapses in judgment, what so I guess yeah, we talked about so much stuff. I guess if anything, like you talked about the garden, just planting food and other stuff, and a few other things. And I asked you this before off camera, and we talked a lot about this off camera. I'm curious. Tell me some more about what you're doing to prepare.
To prepare. Okay. Well,
And
with yeah, for sure. With like I said, with the garden, it's more like the fresh stuff, and of course also it being focused on what are the vegetables, fruits and vegetables that will yield um, faster, of course, faster produce, and what are the ones that need more time
yeah.
to be able to have that fresh thing coming out from the ground. Um, so these are the more like the perishables, and the non-perishables. These are like the dry stuff, the stuff that can just stay for years if needed, like cans, canned goods, and of course rice, beans, chickpeas, all that stuff, oils.
Hmm.
These ones we bought them, of course, by kilo. And the thing is, also the mental preparation of it is like it's good for our mental ease, to have all of that. And I told my wife, like, look, if we're wrong, we just have some extra food. But if we're right that it's going to go on shortage and we're going to be in a problem, um, let's say like globally there's a problem of food shortage, we're also good. But if we're taking a risk and we're not preparing, and it ends up being actually we're coming into a shortage, it's going to be quite a
Would be
challenging times. Let's say like a euphemism of terror. Yeah, but I mean it's like preparation. Yeah, other preparations. I mean, it's not. I saw, for instance, like stuff in the States. That people go and buy a bunch of guns and stuff, and it's like
interesting.
that's like the last thing I would think of.
Speaking of which, if you freeze toilet paper, it lasts longer.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah, toilet paper thing. It's a mystery. I think it's really that panic, stockpiling. It's really because it's like has no logic behind it. When you really think about it, if that's like an enemy that you actually need to survive, that has no connection to reality whatsoever. But more preparations, of course, is um, we are going into scenarios of what if, but we don't spend too much energy talking about it. We actually take action. Okay, what if there's a shortage of dry goods? Okay, we need 20 kilos of this and this and that. That's going to last for, then we actually calculate like what happens if we can't leave the house for a month? Are we good? Still water running, electricity and stuff. Yeah, we're good. Okay, let's see what happens if we can bring it to 2 months, to 3 months. And the thing is that there are things that we won't be able to prepare for, like the loss of morality of people. Let's say when people are hungry and people are sick, there's a part of themselves that stops functioning, and they go and look for that part to be satisfied. Uh, that is said in a very you know soft way. So that is something that what can we do?
Yeah, I think that's yeah, but I mean, yeah. Any case, I think that that's a good. I think, yeah, that's a good practice. I liked what you said earlier about this, just about with regard to it's not necessarily what you're doing, buying a lot of kilos of different foods. It's not necessarily the idea of hoarding like some people are doing where they're panicking and they're trying to, but it's really being practical. And I think that's not really necessarily a bad thing that, to keep, you know, like 5 kilos of lentils. Like if you eat lentils all the time, dude, buy them in bulk. They're cheaper.
Exactly.
Like,
Exactly. Just buy bulks. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly the thing is that worst case scenario, you just have some extra lentils. That's like, and I mean, worst case scenario in the sense of like you just spend it and nothing happened and the world went back to what it was, which I don't believe at all that we're going to go back to the normal that we had, because that's what brought us to the situation that we're in. And
right.
it's going to be a long process of going back to even traveling. It's like they're talking about issuing visas, new visas. They're talking about like heavy restrictions on people traveling from highly infected places. Um, it's gonna the Western world is changing fundamentally. That's what it feels. I'm saying, but if there is a worst case scenario that it is happening, like apocalypse, the world is this, people lose their morality. This, at least you have food. At least you have what you need to sustain yourself.
For sure. Yeah, I think that's a good place to kind of start to wrap it up, though.
Yeah, sure.
I guess, yeah, man. The one thing I do always admire about you is that, you're one of these people who's very thoughtful in your approach to how you do everything. And it shows. I mean, in your music, that comes out for sure.
Thanks, man.
It also, it goes into how you live your life, and I mean, I guess we knew each other when we were both a little, how would I say it, a little bit more juvenile. Um,
Totally.
Grateful that we've both kind of been able to kind of, even though we've gone our own separate ways and done our own different things, still found a way to like you know make sense of this life. And you're I just say that you're an important person in my life, man. I really
Oh,
appreciate
thanks, man. I have
it.
the same feeling towards you. Yeah, for sure, man.
Yeah, and I just really appreciate you taking the time to like talk some more.
Oh, thank you, man. Thank you for having me. For real, for real. It's awesome.
Without a doubt. With that, I'm going to stop.